Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Before we begin, I want to just take an opportunity to thank my colleague, Professor Jonathan Walton, who is the Pusey Minister of the Memorial Church, and all his staff for their gracious hospitality in this beautiful venue that we're in today. So we appreciate your hospitality. Thank you. So my name is David Hempton, and as Dean of the Harvard Divinity School, it's my distinct honor and great privilege to welcome you, Your Holiness, 17th Karmapa to Harvard University to speak about a topic that's very near and dear to all our hearts and minds, caring for life on earth in the 21st century. Your Holiness, we are deeply honored by your presence with us today, and to mark this historical and special visit, I have the privilege of presenting a welcoming gift to you, a memorial bowl that is engraved with our Harvard Divinity School seal, and the words, presented to His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, with the highest appreciation on the occasion of his historic visit to the Harvard Divinity School, Cambridge, Massachusetts, March 26, 2015. So this is my pleasant responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So it's my pleasure to welcome all of you, members of the entourage of His Holiness, honored lamas, faculty, students, and staff at Harvard, as well as our friends and guests from near and far, who are both physically present with us here at the Memorial Church, and also those joining us via our live web stream. A very warm welcome to everyone. Your Holiness, as you know, the Harvard Divinity School has had a long-standing, cordial, and friendly relation with important representatives of Tibetan Buddhism. In 1976, we welcomed His Holiness the 16th Karmapa to HDS, following an invitation from our Hollis Professor Harvey Cox. And on April 30th, 2009, we had the honor of hosting your mentor and teacher, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, here in this very church, on exactly the same spot we are sitting right now. Six years ago, His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke about educating the heart was the topic. And you also have addressed this in your inspiring and beautiful book, The Heart is Noble, Changing the World from the Inside Out. I really recommend you get this book and read it. It's a wonderful read. It seems a natural continuation of this dialogue, therefore, to direct our views now to the future and to the 21st century. And we're excited to hear your thoughts on this vital topic in just a few moments. First, please allow me to say just a few words about Harvard Divinity School's important connections with Buddhism. As many of you know, HDS has had a thriving Buddhist ministry program since 2011. This program is an important part of our mission to educate leaders who are conversant in world religions, as well as ministers who can lead spiritual communities and provide guidance as religious professionals appropriate to modern global conditions. With the support of a generous gift from the Robert H. N. Ho Family Foundation, Harvard Divinity School has thus been able to expand its offerings in ministerial training to include the study of Buddhist ministry. Along with our students, the driving force behind many of these exciting developments has been my friend and colleague, Professor Janet Gyatso, the Hershey Professor of Buddhist Studies and Associate Dean for Faculty and Academic Affairs at Harvard Divinity School. We also have the honor of welcoming among our guests this afternoon the generous donor behind Professor Gyatso's chair, Mr. Barry Hershey. So a special welcome to him. Professor Gyatso and her team in Academic Affairs have put together today's event, and our sincere thanks go to all of you for putting this together so well. So it's now my great pleasure to welcome Professor Gyatso, herself an internationally acclaimed scholar of Tibetan Buddhism, and the author recently of a large and very important book on the history of medicine in early modern Tibet, to introduce our honored guest. So Janet, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an amazing honor for me to be able to introduce the great hero, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, Ugyen Tsinle Dorje, to you this afternoon. I myself have never met him before until today, but of course I've heard so much about him, and it's really a great thrill and honor to finally meet him in person. Our speaker this afternoon is the 17th in a line of tukus, or officially recognized reincarnating lamas. Each in that line were recognized as young boys by disciples of the prior deceased Karmapa on the basis of special signs, indications, and instructional letters. The first Karmapa, Dusum Khyentse, was born in 1193. He is probably the first Tibetan master to produce a recognized incarnation after his own death. This reincarnation, or recognized tuku, was the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, who was an amazing meditator and master who spent years as a hermit. He later visited Kublai Khan, and he also met Marco Polo. The third Karmapa, Rangchen Dorje, was a brilliant theorist. He wrote about the spiritual capacities and pathways in the human body. And his magnum opus, called Sapmo Nangdun, or in English, The Profound Inner Meaning, has also been very important for my work as a scholar. The fifth Karmapa was the teacher of the Ming Emperor Chengzu, who offered to send troops to place all of Tibet under the Karmapa's rule, which the Karmapa declined. Mikyo Dorje, born 1507, wrote copiously on Buddhist phenomenology and Buddhist deconstructive metaphysics. He was also invited to visit the Chinese court, but he declined. The 11th Karmapa, Triying Dorje, was a great and original painter and sculptor. He creatively expanded upon old art styles from both India and China. The 16th Karmapa, Rangchen Rinpa Dorje, was born in the 20th century and escaped Tibet in 1959, taking many of the Karmapa lineage's sacred treasures and relics with him. He had already composed poetry back in the 40s, foretelling Buddhism's imminent demise inside Tibet, and he realized that an important site for the future of his traditions might be the West. He went to meet Pope Paul and later set up many Buddhist centers in Europe and the United States. He died in Illinois in 1981. It is said that he was able to communicate with animals. Once, while teaching in Europe, a large raven tapped on the window where His Holiness was speaking. The bird then flew into the room and directly over to His Holiness, who then instructed two people to go to a barn a few miles down the road where they would find two birds, trapped and starving. They went, and birds were discovered there, and they rescued them. The 16th Karmapa was actually famous for having a special fondness for birds, and he considered a visit to the local pet shop in every city in the world an essential part of his itinerary. No doubt he was murmuring quiet mantras and blessings to the birds when he met them. The current Karmapa is Ugyen Tsinle Dorje, the 17th Karmapa, in whose presence we are today. He is no less exceptional than any of his exceptional predecessors, or should I say his previous lives. And by the way, I would advise you to look on Google. You can search the 16th Karmapa, and you'll see a certain resemblance, at least in my opinion, a certain glow. It's very similar. Anyway, I'm here to tell you that the Tugu system in Tibet is alive and well. The master and teacher before us is obvious evidence of it. Ugyen Tsinle Dorje was born into a nomad family in the Latok region of eastern Tibet in 1985. He became a monk at the age of 4, and then at the age of 7, he was recognized as the 17th Karmapa by a team of Karma Kagyu lamas who were traveling around Tibet on a search team, carrying with them the prediction letter written by the 16th before he died. The signs matched, and the boy was installed at the old monastery Tsurpu in north-central Tibet, where he arrived from the east on horseback with high pomp and procession. This was in 1992. He began to be trained there to be the head of the Karma Kagyu school and to take up the position that his former life had occupied. So this is the Tugu system of Tibet. A special child is formed by a group of masters and monks to become a teacher of wisdom and compassion, a visionary to lead his people. And this is especially important in these times of great duress for his people. And at the age of 14, I think maybe a thunderbolt hit him, I don't know, but he realized that he needed to be outside the strict surveillance of the Chinese authorities, and instead, in the ambience of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama and the many other high teachers who were in exile in the Indian Himalayas, he really needed to receive the necessary teachings for his education. So plans were made carefully, and one night he climbed out of an upstairs window in his monastery residence and accompanied only by his trusted head steward, who by the way is with us today, and a few guides, he made his way across the Himalayas by car, foot, horseback, helicopter, train, and taxi to Dharamsala, India, where he showed up, none the worse for the wear, at the door of the Dalai Lama 1 week later. I remember well that day, January 5, 2000, when the headline hit the world press. I remember well gazing at his face in the newspaper the next day. I felt, even from that distance, the bold and intelligent and amazingly honest energy of this young man from Eastern Tibet. It was also thrilling that the Dalai Lama, the exiled leader of the Tibetan people, along with the many other great lamas of Tibetan Buddhism, were reunited with another member of the really upper echelon of Tibetan Buddhist authority, the Karmapas. It was all purely a result of vision and determination that the right thing should happen, and so it did. His Holiness the 17th Karmapa did indeed continue to study in detail in India, receiving a veritable treasure trove of teachings. He has also been pursuing concerns in the larger world far beyond his study of Tibetan philosophy and religious practice. He's particularly interested in the environment, in gender issues, social justice. And much like his predecessor, the compassionate care of animals is extremely important to him, and he's living as a vegetarian for the last 8 years. He is also a playwright and a director. He wrote and produced a 6-play act on the life of Milarepo, combining elements of traditional Tibetan opera and modern theater, and I really wish I could see that. I think it might be available on YouTube. Among other amazing things, he has recently announced in a very historically important act that he will convene a platform to begin ordaining women as Tibetan bhikshunis in the Mulasarvastivada tradition. And this has huge significance for global Buddhism today. And he's also creating green monasteries all across the Himalayan region. The Divinity School requested that His Holiness would speak to us about some of his ideas and hopes and visions for the future, his ethical concerns about the future of life on planet Earth in the 21st century today. Let me just close by saying, first of all, that His Holiness is accompanied on this tour by his elder sister, Jetsamang Mudrup Belzum, and by several senior scholars, nuns, and monks in his entourage. It is really my great honor to welcome him and his entourage to Harvard Divinity School and the Memorial Church. Je Karmapa Keno, Tuchesi.
다 장원을 도만 섬지다. 오늘 하버드 라브치미기 나놀리아 예배 안데 개와나 버스레 다는 신기 롬녀와 소레 롬녀와 다나시 대표 장원을 양에 도마 섬주샤이.
First, I'd like to greet everyone here at my first visit to Harvard University and Harvard Divinity School. I want to greet all of you, professors, aspiring scholars, students, and everyone who's here.
지다당에 인지디 인지 탭자를 인지 차교지 디 잡신가 다 임비네야 디 하버드 라브드 시민디데 나로래 잡아데 잡로아데 지레면도 제가 아니 가수래다 아줄이야 기주야 보지 제가 안데 기주디 주네야 보지 저런 디스터라죠
I can actually speak some English. I feel that I speak it somewhat poorly. I certainly don't think my English is up to Harvard standards. So therefore, I brought a translator.
The wonderful translator, I think. Karmapa kundi churu ba ta Americalia pebre. Jena pyo nama sange bege ta kharjure ji lama chimbyo chene ji chige nujolia an chosho ze din benge nga shyo du jikche du chadi ore an jesa on de pese hablia du nabre jesa dangi kong ji sun ma de nga ji dabu ji ore domo de dabu ore kashi ngalia this ore karsa de I did plastic surgery. That looks like a little bit. That is kind of joke. Yangar delia yonto vachon de gabsha chons. And Adana singi as a peggy. A lot of me uchi was language which are their peche. Takanda digita lugi gurimia to see me in Dustane. The ditching Dina Rolia, about the Missendi, Somsendi Narolia, you are Chumde and the Kausha.
As Professor Jomso mentioned, the 16th Jawan Karmapa came to the United States as one of the first Tibetan Buddhist masters to bring the Tibetan Buddhist teachings to Western countries, and during that time did indeed, as she said, visit Harvard University. She remarked that my face resembles his. Perhaps I've had plastic surgery in order to make it so. And then he said that's a kind of joke. But in any case, whether I resemble my predecessor or not, I'm very, very glad to be back here. And also in consideration of that I'm following on a previous visit by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, to this very church.
Daddy, Zirim di Garu, Zirim the Mangushi Cheje, Tanasha Gwen, Tawatsa Shibiche, and Mangushi Cheje, and the Togongonda, and Begisha with this. There's kind of too much, some of the same this sensing the child, Dinarolia, and the Gisha was this Kabush Charlie, the Imbina Kantaria. And didn't Asia the topic the Tagisum singing. During his Zibi Narolia, Zabulingi, that is Sosa, somewhere we can drop Sosa Namlia, Kashuretaji, Simguru Sanatado, Yanaji, Telia, Karslav, take care of condition or Sadi, Josity and David on J.
I've had a busy day, actually a little bit too busy, especially when you consider that my main thing today was to come here and address all of you this talk. But nevertheless, I will do my best to address the topic you've presented, how to care for life, living things on Earth, this planet, in the 21st century.
Chidanda Namju Tangesia, Tangesia, Sam, to Takada, nama sangebe ni chue na ga principle samarbe ji ningbu ru ji de khara sana an tinjung gi tawa sana jando yana tinjung gi dar jin ta xia di cha de or sam chli.
To start with, the real essence of the Buddha's teachings is interdependence, the view that everything is interdependent.
Inaya the interdependence di tawa dang tedrup dang yana ji sinyi riba samara philosophical ta dinji sinyi ribe gi sinyi riba zamai ma ta de khande che nga ju mizi na lo le ya dinje be ta kandar tinjung gi jin tang de mizi na lo khande che nyam su le dang ta na sing gi and bring it to emotional level. Sanadado, Kandarjis. The Simsor Tolia, Kandis, and the Dinjung, Jintanti, Kandis, some Tongrasati, Hajan Kachum Bachitongu.
But I think it's extremely important that we not leave the doctrine or idea of interdependence as a mere philosophical idea, but that we actually ask ourselves the question, how can I live according to interdependence? How can I apply interdependence in my life, including my emotional life?
During Easter, social media, dana singi information errors, chatting Durab Sigara, Chasant Dinaro Liangazu, chatting the Tindu Trizal DNA, and Zombuling Badi, Chile Jigdan Imbati. Ngale kyang ngse thwe de chimbachi da number 7 chimbachi imba ji nga su same sing yo.
We can all surely observe that in this 21st century, through social media and other technologies, in this era of information, as we call it, our mutual interdependence is even more obvious than ever before.
Ina nga su information somewhere where daji nizu kashura daji mangbuchi atulya da mangbuchi ya di chibe pingyo mane samsam aso nyang aso sablya ji more information we get da ngui nizu di ngaso ji seru jaru jawa chabre di ina jikjana we need to tell you the main machabachi. We need to tell you information mangchan. Also the Google do we have Marie this one I only.
However, information alone is not enough. While from one point of view, we might say that the more information we have, the clearer our situation becomes, sometimes we have so much information that it's too much and it actually obscures us and prevents us from understanding our situation.
In Hindustan, conditions, Dinjung Gitawa Sadi, Chikashuri, information, understanding, Lebenang, understanding, the Niganang Sanatando. Kanda, she, we would try an allow. Condition.
So interdependence is not just about the sharing of information or an understanding we might arrive at in our brains, in our heads. It is about sharing the feelings in our hearts and about our real experience.
Tata di penange chungdu kauke sonaru sharing. A chungdu sane the lost sumshi cup the vare. Tea coblia, Mazupulia, and springtime and Dungas spring ray. Hello.
Tonga? Autumn.
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 Okay. I thought he's asleep. Autumn ray.
Larry.
Tatanga chica karakibamendo. Ada Payulia. And it was a drawing in Zam. 근데 아주 칼라 쪼르디 샤치기와래 제자 샤 인주사는 아주 여기 고소 섬네 심젠인데 아주 잠잠 또 뒤주질이야디 심제세요래 이 심제세베 거리야 아주 심제세단디 아주 배 심제세단다 디 지가르에 factory 지 디주치라는 지 많이 받다 간다 지 심지세랑디 레라버지 요마 양만은 지가르다지 제가 마체디 심지 카드 받담지 직셔봐 데 레라버 시원로 심지 레라버 멋이시 우마다 주주 삼선 주주 제가 고면도 야버지 정말 다 간다 쉬우죠 고 주주 그게 들어 예비체 데디 수부 참아 응나기 수부 참아 응나기 예비체 도시 시나서 쉬어래 Did you simply say we got it? Tatang and I say about Chingo. And did you stand a bit? Tell a master better, Ninglia, master better, so under that casual. Ninja Sana to me that Ninja said, and Azugi, Namju, Nambegi, Shedia, Niji, Tini, Mambuji, Shedia, did it Niji mean Hakomata? Diana, that is similar to German maybe, to Monsieur, Ninja, that Niji, ranking on the air, on the air. 다이네 겁들이 세주인데 샤르마다 심지에 세자 방법슈자 샤 야, 샤렌스들 양 샤서 그러 지분 니가 냠도 내 겁들이 산에 참상 내 능미들 안 고고 단지 심지에 세베 거 나치리여나 근데 게 디스터브 지리자 참상 고고 단지 til 근데 이게 니주 좀 그래
I can remember an experience that I had as a child when I was 3 or 4, where I was living then. In the autumn, as nomads, we would have to slaughter some animals since we relied upon meat as one of our principal sources of food. Now, nomads, of course, don't get their meat in a market that's been slaughtered in a factory. You have to do it yourself, and it's not easy. Mostly, it was done by my family. They would bind the mouth.
No, not my family. Somebody
By the community?
Hiding something.
Oh.
Mostly, yeah, okay.
Okay. Mostly, it was done by
people
binding the jaws or mouth of the animal so it would slowly suffocate. This is an agonizing way to kill an animal, as it takes, at least in my memory, almost half an hour sometimes for the animal to die. Before it's dead, it's covered in sweat from its agony and slow suffocation. And I clearly remember this. And I remember the way I would feel as a young child watching this. I had an unbearable feeling in my heart. I wouldn't want to call it compassion. I don't know if what I felt then corresponds to a strict definition of compassion or not. But it was a very intense feeling, so that it got to the point where when the slaughtering was going to occur, they would trick me and send me somewhere else so I wouldn't be around and wouldn't disturb them doing it.
Did you sound that no educated somewhere? And Dana Singi, not much knowledge someone, did you in a Korange the German maybe so not to say. That the Lord Dungalia, Kamacha. That the name Gomben Kamabe Chilia, Deje. And the highly educated somewhere, she Namasangi with Churchok, she Yamle, that Lobjon Tobo the Chevre. Says the Mima which is something like that. The Kamaba Kashweta till Deje, that was Shiviji Kashweta. Spiritual qualities somewhere. Churchok, you intend to be Shiviji Yagachi, get some of the Tingle of the Mamachi. That in being near those part, Chidelon, some don't do that. Gasha Chimmy does some of that, they can go back to see some of the woman needs you. Needs some of the time, Kala. Go to Yugi, near Chunjun Gogi, German Mayim Bam, Semi, needs 10 Roji. 다다지 쥐마서는 지 삼당가체 균zen의 망고다 다다 균zen 망고시에요. 균zen 망고시에 philosophical reason 다 망고지 시에요. 알아디 오마되는 신기 지 가르레디 배 really sort 지 쥐마모인 버지다 다나신 쇠도면 버지 진짜 용하디 오마는 시죠 가보죠. 제가 뒤균zen데네 예 그뒤네야 급지리 춘춘 거기 쥐마모인 비다 생부 전한들래 that really appreciated Senandado. I miss that. Samaroda.
Now, remember that at that time, at the age of 3 or 4, I was a very young boy with no education whatsoever and not much knowledge or experience of things. But nevertheless, I had this natural and genuine feeling of sorrow and compassion. Well, at the age of 7, I was recognized as the Karmapa and put on a high throne and began to receive a very thorough education. Now, people usually, when they think of the Jawan Karmapa, they think of someone who must have tremendous spiritual qualities. But I have to say to you that when I think back and remember the unfabricated compassion I felt for those slaughtered animals as a young and uneducated child, I miss that degree of genuine, unfabricated feeling. And I think that in some ways, it surpasses the compassion that I can generate now through lots of education and thought and so on. And therefore, I really appreciate the memory of that uneducated compassion I had as a child, and I miss it.
트레이드상 아주 망고치리아 충주이네 베나지 부춘주이 베걸리아 전신 다 망고치리아 다 가주래 아주 망고치리 생계기 참지 뉴버스난라도 참지 연대 아주 생계 용대하지 근데 스도아 가시스도 부진 무용나 디지털이 부신다데 무용을 just 디디디 사고 지기질에 초안도 신경 알았어. 그래서 간다야 디 미지보 뭐예요? 둔돌라서 심지엔데 동네와 준비사네 전신이 가술이야지 가서 심퍼티스난도 야나지 그주의 동해 충분된 가술이야 하고지 초하게야지 전신이 아주 용대요. 다디 최예매 기제 말에 안 다나 신기 로종 예매 기제 말에 간당 아주 좀 미지 다 인베션을 전신 용대하지 바이지
I think that children, especially very young children, have an innate capacity for genuine love and love. For example, how often have we all seen that when one child is crying, another child will immediately start crying as well because they recognize the feeling and they naturally sympathize with it and share it. I think we're all capable of this, not just with other human beings. I think our sympathy can extend to all living beings, including animals. And I don't think this has anything to do with whether we regard ourselves as spiritual or not, or whether we are educated or not. I think it is an innate part of being human.
엔다간다 가셔다지 도나 아주기 인지기 사바데 지 로는 로 버튼나 신지 on off 자유에서 다 간다 망고지 도시야 연디거라 망고지기 에는 아주 배시 첨부 쳐주잖아 아니 윤세 마음상 등으로 다 부인주잖아 그러 가르 템베 있네다고 초와들 연셔거래 다 전부 찾아서 다 삼다 이 제고 예나면은 나라는 개변 예나면은 너기 예나면은 다 삼아 망보시 땅제 조지니 아주 가서지 grown up somewhere 가다 랑서로 게요 주스다네 아주 초지네 근데 가서지 연대처럼 줘서 그러다 초지네 땅아 careful로 찾다 양 가서 디진 고 대본으로 찾 약간 레셔웨나 삼동안에 찾아 난 이제 지금 도한다 간다 니주 망보지 땅 안데 저바시라면도 야나 나자 저바시라면도 제상 알 주도메 섬선으로지 야나 단디에 주도 셰비나 나라 강에 요서 섬선으로 다 이제 니주 망보지 돈 리스크 망보지 통하지 니지 도안에 땅 아주 심기 땡기기 예배 엔다 간다 자와레 닌지레 되게 돼봐 가르셔 디메디베스 차나
As we grow up, we are subjected to various changes in our environments and circumstances, and I think that these can cause our innate compassion to become obscured. It's almost as though we're born with the compassion button switched on and it gets switched off. Because as adults, now we need to think about it. It doesn't come as easily to us. And when we think about the suffering of another and the possibility of taking responsibility for helping them, we always think, well, would doing so harm me or help me? How would it affect my life? In one way, this is because we are, as we like to say, grown up. We're educated, and we're therefore careful, even clever, maybe strategic. And so we're clever enough to think, well, this doesn't involve me. I don't feel connected to that. And also to worry about the risk that we might be posing to ourselves by feeling compassion for others. And I think all of this tends to obscure or repress our innate love and compassion.
제가 ninja not to think of ninja somewhere. Ninja sometimes to generate somewhere. The change. The Hindustani that the young people as encouragement. That is ninja 최고로 사지 많이 봐. ninja 천도기다 간다. 가수래 volunteerly somewhere dedicate 야나 심슈당 박사님 요구하다. 계속. 진짜 제비나 아니 신의 니지사지 용하지. 제가 박사님당 진짜기다 volunteer somewhere. 다 진짜 사람들이 니지기 자와를 차리요.
Compassion, after all, is not a thought. It is a feeling. And it's not something that we can really inculcate or even encourage particularly. Compassion is something that each of us has to volunteer through our natural courage and benevolence. And that benevolence is really the root of compassion.
네, 인도산에 아주 대 당기 쉬버는 생기 아주 딘중그 따와서는 장도 아니 따와 집어면 딱 간다 딘중그 다사데 미지나로래 아주 디 무슨 아주 냠수 용어야 됩시다. 간다 지기질이야. 저거 차디에 버지. 심지 지기질 신한 누주 빈준 저거 차디에 버지다. 다나 신기 엔지 난기 주 심전 되게 되네. 빈준 지기질은 저거 차디에 버지. 난 도나지 아주 여기 칼라스 세비네레 둘러스 겸비네레 다나지 우기 교원 순제이미네. 빈준 지를 지대인데 버지 마다베 아주 릉수 투번을 버지. 매버시 또 차디어래 레이 디균전을 되네 아니 심지에 생기 내다스는 장도 심지에 생기 다 디두디 소수기 디두기 차시에는지 차디어래 진짜 이미 균전을 되네 아니 랑기 지금 겐쿠라가 삼로 겐쿠른도 삼바디 진짜 지금 가르쳐다 내다하러디 당 고쳐버서는 라도 당 고쳐버 지부 평가면도 가다디 내당 될려지 오늘은 셈니 냠수 영어로지 깨베 토네 아니 신내지 가르에 긴구르기 다 이제 닝도부터 대비 니지 깨줘야지 니지 대 닝도부터 대비 니지 다 이제 깨줘야지 영습에서
As I said, interdependence, while it is a concept or an idea, must be more than an idea or a look or view. It has to be something that we experience. We need to experience and recognize the interdependence of this environment and all of the beings who inhabit it, and the interdependence among beings, between any one being and all others. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the air we breathe has all arisen through the actions of other beings. We cannot survive independently. We cannot eat, wear clothes, or breathe independently. The more keenly we feel this, the more we will feel that the welfare or well-being of other beings, their happiness and suffering, is very much part of our own. And that will help us begin to take responsibility for the welfare of other beings. But it's not enough simply to begin or set about taking such responsibility. We have to actually feel within us that type of compassion that is genuinely courageous.
안다 양gar 당기 저버지 쉬위 제가 나 춘주 거기 사네 당기 쉬어나지 아니 샤서야래 다나시 샤라 가보시나요 디사 미카신 아끼지도 저랑 칼라 가르 가오예스 다 칼라 가르 가오예스 라두산다 샤라 가오예스 로르지데 고베나 태요 다 얘네 다다 샤서야 말어 안데 다 샤라 가오예 람네 초스케 메면서 제 라운드 지 샤키슈 생겨서 괜찮아. 안드레 두산에 다 딘데지래. 안데 치즈 야갈레네. 안에 가다 샤사 삼르샤 다디 조디 아주 망부지기 아주 샤스가 야르데네 샤디 칸에 정부디 샤디 근지 정부디 아주라마 망부지가 통고야만 다 당기되는 라바도 변화 지 가서 총계를 야게징에 총계를 지나라라 샤디가 사람 마켓 나는데 녀간도야로 빠기 제시하래 다들 가네요 메모치 신거 봐 근데 부춘주도 하고 이 다들 버지지 마켓은 수요시 기용 만들어서 마도 디셈진지 비게 예버지 대바 세네 디네 총대버지 망부치 신거 봐
To return to my experience as a child, I ate meat. And actually, I liked meat quite a lot. Sometimes, even now, people will say, what's your favorite food? And if I were to answer honestly, my favorite food would still be meat, but I can't say that because I gave up eating it. I don't eat it. So I stopped eating meat several years after arriving in India. And part of the reason for this is that if you think about it, most of us who eat meat never really see where the meat we eat comes from. Especially if you live in a large city in a developed nation, you probably buy your meat in a supermarket and it's packaged in plastic and so on. To the extent that a small child that goes to such market would probably imagine that meat is a thing that they make there in that supermarket. And there's no sense that it's the body of an animal.
제가 아메리카는 용게다 저보다 좀 아투아요. 이제 두장 아샤스거로. 결혼 아메리카 레스와나다. 바베큐 아버지 인서. 오늘 바베큐 배신 보아라. 바베큐 제인 인서. 땅에 바베큐디 고데로. 얘도 제리야. 신의 아메리카 레벨에 드디어 아샤서. 자. 근데 바베큐 사종았어. 바베큐 로겐 고데로 이나다. 오늘 아메리카 레스잖아. 드디어 사 말해. 샤 미사야 담자 체자라. 바베큐 사도.
When I
아주디 아메리카에 드디어 랑가데 텍사스 바베큐 된데 통. 아이네. 사람인도 다.
When I arrived in India in the year 2000, and I met several American friends who would say, well, when you come to the United States, we'll offer you barbecue. We have this amazing way to cook meat in our country called barbecue. Well, by the time I got here, the first time in 2008, I'd already committed to never eating meat again. And so it was too late. So I never actually got to taste barbecue. But I would be driven along highways and I'd see Texas barbecue on the side of the road. And it would make me salivate, but it's too late.
제가 뒤준제 때네 아주 딩두기 소외내란 직전에 직가루 컴포트 섬을 레라로 진답되었지 초진이 니주카시 아주 통고 당기잖아시 왜 니주카시 디디 샤드주 사다가 서요 아르디네 마세 콘리아 디 유림도 스텝 이 가리면 내가 아주 통고 리 뒤준제 때네 awareness 말하다 디제게 가르쳐야지 에지 the interdependent awareness ko adi shivji cash much chade
Nowadays, while from one point of view we're made extremely comfortable by the way we do things, the way we do things also conceals a great deal from our sight, such as the process that culminates in the meat we eat. And so we lose an awareness of our connection to things, and that we have to therefore deepen our awareness of our interdependence.
Hindustan da paji kedri shia de ga zu yimba da kana de Hindustan ne da ke chi shu di kandar ni ji sa di ka sa apathy samare da de zomni ga thaliya ji disaster samare de ge zomni ne ji gbo chenbo da ji ne da chön ji gbo chenbo ong yong ga re di na ne the disaster ji di azulia 참선 매워 되게 disaster 지금 알아 될 때에 미망고지 가지고 겸매 방괴 매봐 안다는시 고설 처음에 근데 내단 지금 토네 나 동해 망고지 한데도 시작해 알아 이내 디 disaster 디 가래서나 직전에 가서도 냠도 예대없이 가서 하마오지 아파티사데 아주 이게 셈이야 녀지 대대없이 이 disaster想怎么下来全的那个就不得做아주 avoid 시도하래 이내야 진짜 disaster的소소하게 셈이야 인상 근데 avoid 해야 돼 가고 싶지 않아 그래서 디균제는 참에 가셔다 장심 대양 지 인도된데 막 선한다도 야 가시 responsibility interdependent responsibilities la de heavy burden de ne ma yimche ta de zhuo dan jie ba yin do de ba jin de ge ngin bo ge sam ba zhe kwa de ke shim de sam thing
That's more or less all I'm going to say, but I want to leave you with one thought. When we talk about having compassion regarding the many disasters that occur in this world, usually we think of things such as horrific epidemics, wars, violence, starvation, and so on. But there is one source of disaster that we often fail to recognize, which is a lack of love. A lack of love can cause people to have no help when they need help, and no friend when they need a friend. So in a sense, the most dangerous thing in the world is apathy. We think of weapons, violence, warfare, and disease as terrible dangers, and indeed they are. But we can take measures to avoid them. But once our apathy takes hold of us, we can no longer avoid it. So I urge you to feel a love that is courageous. Not courageous in the sense of the grudging undertaking of a heavy burden in feeling responsible for the welfare of others, but the joyous acknowledgement of your interdependence with every other living being and with this environment itself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.